Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is running a query on ChatGPT. That query is being processed by a chip. That chip was manufactured on an island 180 kilometers from China. Every AI model on Earth stops with it. The dangerous part is, the people betting trillions of dollars on the AI revolution have never had to seriously think about this chain. That is about to change. Right now, the global AI boom is the biggest investment story on Earth. Nvidia's market cap crossed $3 trillion. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta committed over $400 billion in AI infrastructure spending for 2025 alone. If you have a pension fund, an index fund, or a 401k, you are already inside this trade. The companies driving the AI revolution now make up roughly a third of the entire S&P 500. And the entire thing, every data center, every AI model, every dollar of that investment sits downstream of a single supply chain, one that runs through one island, one company, one machine that only one factory on Earth knows how to build. So how did the most important technology revolution in a generation end up balanced on a single point of failure? And what would actually happen, step by step, if that point broke? Because once you understand how this supply chain works, you'll understand why the AI trade is really a geopolitical bet, and why almost nobody is pricing in what happens if it breaks. Quick note, if this is the kind of analysis you want more of, hit the like button and subscribe. We publish multiple times a week, no noise. Before we get into the system, here's the simplest way to understand what's actually happening. Imagine trying to engrave the entire text of every book ever written onto a surface the size of your fingernail. Then imagine doing it tens of thousands of times an hour, with zero defects, using light. That's not a metaphor. That's what an ASML EUV machine literally does. It uses extreme ultraviolet light generated by vaporizing tin droplets with a laser 50,000 times per second to print circuits so small that 10 of them, lined up side by side, measure the width of a strand of DNA. One machine weighs as much as a commercial airlift, ships in 40 containers, costs $380 million. Only one company on Earth knows how to build it. That company is ASML. And here's where the system gets interesting. ASML didn't set out to own the most critical machine in the world. The physics forced them there. For 50 years, the semiconductor industry ran on a single rule, Moore's Law. Every 2 years, the number of transistors on a chip roughly doubles. More transistors means more power. More power means better technology. But by the 2000s, the circuits were getting so small that conventional light couldn't print them anymore. The wavelength was just too long. The solution, extreme ultraviolet light, required solving problems that had never been solved before. The mirrors that focus the light come from Zeiss in Germany, polished so precisely that if you scaled one to the size of Germany itself, it would have no bump taller than a centimeter. The light source comes from a specialist in San Diego, the optics from a company in Japan. 300 suppliers, 13 countries, 30 years. You cannot reverse engineer this. You cannot build it from scratch. The knowledge is distributed across 100 institutions, embedded in thousands of engineers who have spent careers on single components. This isn't a machine you can copy. It's 30 years of physics made physical. And here's where it stops being a technology story and starts being something else. Here's the question almost nobody asks. If TSMC in Taiwan makes 90% of the world's advanced chips, who makes the machines that let TSMC do it? One company, ASML. Next question. If ASML is that essential, why hasn't anybody else built a competitor? Because you can't. Not because it's locked behind patents, because building it requires 30 years of accumulated physics across 300 suppliers. Even if you had the blueprint, you don't have the supply chain. And building that supply chain takes decades. So here's the third question. Who depends on this? You do. Every smartphone, every laptop, every AI model that exists, every defense system in every NATO country, all of it runs on chips. The advanced chips, the ones powering the AI revolution, all come from TSMC, and TSMC can only make them because of one factory in the Netherlands. The chain is simple. ASML builds the machine, TSMC uses it to print chips, chips go into NVIDIA's GPUs, and GPUs go into data centers. Data centers run the AI models. The query you ran on ChatGPT this morning terminates at one factory in Veldhoven. Break any link in that chain, and it doesn't slow down. It stops. And unlike oil, there is no strategic reserve. There is no alternative route. There is no backup. Let's put real numbers on it. Between 2023 and 2025, NVIDIA's market cap grew from $300 billion to over $3 trillion, a 10 times increase in 2 years, the fastest value creation in the history of public markets. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta committed over $400 billion in AI infrastructure spending for 2025 alone. That is more than the entire GDP of Denmark spent in 12 months. Building data centers that require chips that require machines that require one factory. And every dollar of that investment prices in one assumption, that the chips keep flowing. Here's where this stops being someone else's problem. If you have a pension fund, an index fund, or a 401k or a brokerage account, you are almost certainly exposed to this trade. The AI companies now make up roughly a third of the entire S&P 500 by market capitalization. A third of the retirement savings of the average American worker is riding on the assumption that chip supply runs without interruptions. Every time you run a query, generate an image, open a map, stream a show, that transaction happens on a chip, made in Taiwan, on a machine built in the Netherlands, shipped through a strait that China considers part of its strategic interest. The AI trade is not just a stock market story, it's a geopolitical bet, and the people placing that bet have never had to price in what happens if it breaks. And China knows all of this. In 2019, the United States pressured the Dutch government to block ASML from shipping its most advanced machines to China. The restrictions have been tightened every year since. Today, China cannot import a single ASML EUV machine. They cannot import the generation below that, and pressure on the remaining access is increasing. This is the most consequential export control in the modern era, not because it stops China from selling chips, because it stops China from making them. China currently imports roughly $400 billion in semiconductors every year, more than it spends on oil. Its domestic industry cannot produce the advanced chips it needs for AI, for defense, or for the consumer economy that its growth depends on. For China, ASML's machines aren't a competitive disadvantage, they're an existential choke point. China's response has been to pour money into domestic alternatives. Over $150 billion committed to semiconductor self-sufficiency since 2014. The results are real, but not where they need to be. China's most advanced domestic chips are roughly 2 generations behind TSMC. In a world where the gap between 7 nanometers and 3 nanometers determines whether your AI model is competitive, that distance is enormous. Without access to ASML's machines, China cannot close it. Not in 5 years, possibly not in 10. The physics simply don't allow it. Which means China faces a choice it has been quietly avoiding this entire time. Continue falling further behind, or change the equation another way. There is one way to change the equation that doesn't require building a better machine. Before we go further, here's something most people don't know. ASML has built remote disable capability into its machines, the ability to deactivate units remotely if the geopolitical situation deteriorates. Read that again. The most critical manufacturing infrastructure in the world, the machines that make every advanced chip on Earth, comes with an off switch, held by a company in Eindhoven, Netherlands. Which means somewhere, in a corporate boardroom in the Netherlands, there is a contingency plan for shutting down the global semiconductor industry with a software command. There are 46 ASML machines currently operating in Taiwan. If that switch were thrown, TSMC stops. NVIDIA stops. Every AI data center on Earth starts drawing down its chips reserves. The question of how long those reserves last is a question nobody in the AI trade is currently pricing. So let me give you this system in one breath. One company in the Netherlands builds the machine that can print advanced chips. The only machine. One company in Taiwan uses that machine to make 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors. Every AI model, every data center, every defense system, and at least a third of the retirement savings of every American worker, all of it sits downstream of that chain. China cannot access the machine. China knows this, and China is currently looking at the island. The global AI trade is pricing an uninterrupted chip supply for the next decade. That assumption has never been stress tested. The variable that breaks it isn't the market correction, it isn't a bad earnings report. It's 180 kilometers of water. And the day the people pricing the AI trade have to actually think about that water is the day the numbers stop making sense. And this is where the story stops being about technology and begins being about power. Taiwan isn't just the world's chip factory. It is the single most important piece of manufacturing infrastructure in the global economy. More strategically critical than any oil field. More irreplaceable than any shipping lane. Because the world can find more oil. It can reroute other shipping lanes. There is no rerouting TSMC. There is no alternative. There is no stockpile large enough to buy time while one is built. ASML's machines were supposed to be a triumph of human ingenuity, proof that the hardest problems in physics could be solved through international cooperation. But instead, they became the most important choke point in the modern world, and one of the most overlooked. Because the day those machines go dark, the system doesn't slow down. It stops. One chip cycle at a time. And by the time the world understands what's happening to its data centers, its markets, and its AI models, it's already too late. Read the system, not the headline. I'll see you next week.